So welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out for the event. I know a lot of you guys know the Eastern Market down here. I don't know how often you frequent it, but thank you for coming out at this particular time of the day. So just so you guys can get acquainted with the folks, some of you might know and some of you don't. A couple of the folks work for other organizations, but we have a couple of folks who are founders of their own. And so I am just going to tap into the two that started their own for them to give you a little insight on how they look at Detroit, the food system here, and why they decided to actually start doing urban farming and a restaurant in the city of Detroit. So Gwen, I'll let you go first.
Hi everybody, my name's Gwen Meyer and I'm the farmer owner of Coriander Kitchen and Farm. I started my project with Allison Harris, I started my project in 2015 with Allison Harris, who's the chef owner of Coriander. You know, what motivates me to grow is that I come from a family that values and comes from a culture of growing food. The memories I have of picking strawberries and peaches with my grandparents, tomatoes that were like acidic apples I would eat with my mom. These are all active memories for me as I work every single day.
Excuse me, Gwen, excuse me. There is a lot of noise or I'm hearing a lot of feedback in my ear that's pointed in this direction. So if you could keep your voices down just a tad bit so that we can give attention to our folks that are here, it would be greatly appreciated. You know, the acoustics is a little somewhat, so please be mindful and respectful. Thank you.
Thanks. I decided to start this business in Detroit after coming to Detroit in 2008 and working in urban ag and seeing the amazing community that is present here in the city with a focus on food and a focus on health, and feel so honored to be part of a history and a community and neighbors that all are working on growing food together.
Thank you. Deeply rooted.
All right. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Jasmine Carr. I founded Deeply Rooted Produce in 2016 as a student, thanks to Stop This Action. He's the main reason why I did this. I could literally cry because he's the only reason that I did, because he exposed me to a different way of thinking when there was an abandoned greenhouse on Wayne State's campus that was being erected to bring beauty and nature back to the city of Detroit. So I was inspired by Stop This to grow food. I started volunteering with Keep Growing Detroit, and all of this was based off of me studying nutrition and kinesiology, learning about the body and how I can fuel myself as a student athlete on campus. I take everything pretty far. I don't do anything surface level. So when I learned how to transplant and learn that you can grow an abundance of different things from Keep Growing Detroit, I took it into my own hands, attended an agricultural training program with Earthworks Urban Farm on the east side of Detroit, and then as a result of Earthworks Urban Farm's agricultural training program, I purchased my own house in 2018, and there was a lot of abandoned lots, a lot of properties that were just open, and a lot of opportunity is what I saw. So a lot of people that I observed kind of gave up on Detroit, but they were still living there, and they still kind of had faith in the future, but they weren't doing anything about it. So for me, I like to just implement. Sometimes I may have too many things on my plate, but I like to get stuff started and finish it to the end. So I do have a vision of a more food sovereign Detroit as soon as I learned what that word was, and continue to educate people in Detroit and see the light and the love on people's faces once they taste their first local strawberry or their local peach or pear and things like that. It changes your life for good. So that's why I do what I do.
So I'm gonna say thank you for having a platter, because now you have graduated from a plate to a platter. Thank you. So, and I'll go to our next couple of two. Oakland Avenue is doing wonderful things over in the North End. Can you tell me how Oakland Avenue is helping with equity with the residents, the community in that area, and the resources that are being provided to help?
Well, hello everyone. My name is Natasha Tallman. I am the program manager for North End Christian CDC, which is a nonprofit organization that's been around for about 23 years now. They own and operate Oakland Avenue Urban Farm, who I believe is in its 17th year of existence this year. The question was, what is Oakland Avenue Urban Farm doing to support equity in the community? Well, our executive director, Jerry Ann Hebron, this year, and I'm sorry guys, I have notes, I have to speak. But Jerry Ann Hebron, she is a part of the USDA Urban Ag Innovative Production Committee, which is a very new committee that was started to create equitable programming and financial opportunities for urban growers, and specifically black and brown growers. So ultimately, this committee calls out issues with the USDA, with some of the inequitable funding practices that happens with the smaller urban growers, and so they're working on that. There are about 12 people all over the country who are part of this committee, as well as 17 offices, and one of the offices are here is being opened in the city of Detroit. We also, Oakland Avenue Urban Farm, along with, Keep Growing Detroit, as well as the Detroit Black Food Security Network, partnered together to create, and I believe Winona, how do you say the name correctly? Thank you. Ms. Bynum spoke to the fact that we formed what is called the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund. And the purpose of the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund was to give black and brown growers an opportunity to not only grow here in the city of Detroit, but to purchase land. And so they've given, I believe, over 50 grants now. It is
About 600,000.
Is it
If I'm not mistaken, I think we have a couple of recipients that are here. If they're not here now, they were here, so I did see a few.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I mean, so I love to say this, Oakland Avenue Urban Farm is unapologetically black, and they're about BIPOC growers and creating space and opportunity for those growers to have, create an economic viability through urban farming.
But you guys also have landscaping company, not landscaping, but a co-op or some sort where you support, and I think the new economic co-op folks help to get that started, if I'm not mistaken.
It was the year of the pandemic. We had a wonderful relationship with, the Detroit Justice Center, and I'm sorry guys, I was shaking.
You're fine. You are fine. These are folks that don't necessarily know you, and we know you, so we're good. We're family here in the city of Detroit.
Yes. So, the Detroit Justice Center, and I'm just having a hard time thinking of the next name of the organization, and I will remember it before I finish the statement, I'm sure. But we formed what was called the North End Co-op Academy, where we brought in, I believe it was about 32, and they just all happened to be people of color. That wasn't intentional, but 32 individuals who were interested in creating a cooperative business. And out of that academy, which was about an 8-month-long program, there were 3 businesses formed. One is the Black Bottom Garden Center. Another was a beauty supply, but they dissolved it. Then there's Stuff Detroit, which I'm a co-owner of as well, which is a fresh food cooperative cafe. So now the Black Bottom Garden Center, yes, is another way to, I guess that is equity, right? Yeah. So that's how the Black Bottom Garden Center was.
So, yeah, thank you. And so we'll move on to our Michigan State Extension person, who's been around the city of Detroit for a number of years. So, don't sugarcoat it. So So how have you guys been over there expanding and working to help with equity, I'll say?
Hello, everybody. Better? Yes. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Let's all just take a moment. Let's just breathe. Doesn't that feel nice? Let's do it again. That's good. Hi, everybody. My name is Stathis Pauls. I am the site manager and programs coordinator, and otherwise one half of the two-headed monster that runs the Detroit Partnership for Food, Learning, and Innovation, which is a lot of words, so we call it the DP Fly. When I say DP, you say fly, DP. Fly. You'll never forget it. We are a 3.3-acre urban farm and research site. We are part of Michigan State University Extension. And as far as I know, unless things have changed as of today, we are the only extension network urban ag farm in the entire nation. Now, I like to say we're a big fish in a big pond, right? Detroit is urban ag mecca. So we like to give ourselves props, but we also need to recognize where we're at. And I think that really embodies how we try to leverage ourselves in this ecosystem, right? We're part of academia, and academia doesn't have exactly the greatest track record of treating communities of color or disadvantaged communities well. So Naeem Edwards, who is our site director, who's in Ecuador, enjoying himself. We like to think of ourselves as sort of a nexus, right? We're trying to leverage resources, leverage power, leverage connections, and channel that to people that need it and have systemically and historically not had access to those things. As far as myself, as Michelle put it, yeah, I've been around for a few years. I guess, got my starts, my big chops with Eastern Market. I managed the Detroit Community Markets Partnership for a few years, where I met many of the lovely people in the crowd on this panel. But yeah, I've touched everything from farmers markets to for-profit farming, non-profit farming, garden resource center stuff, food rescue. So naturally I ended up at a university because that's what everybody who doesn't know what they want to do with their life does. I'm kidding. But yeah, I guess the crown jewel of the site at the moment at the DP Fly is our edible food forest, where we currently are growing 45 varieties of fruits and nuts in the city as an effort to show people that not only is urban agriculture important, but urban agroforestry is important too, right? You can grow these fruits and nuts in your own house, in your backyard, and the ecological, environmental, and food benefits of that are going to stretch out so much longer. You have to wait, right? Best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, second best time is now. Right. But the sheer amount of food that you will receive from planting a standard apple tree versus planting tomatoes every year is staggering, right? So just showing folks that there's short-term visions and then there's long-term visions. Yes.
And so, those fruits and nuts are really amazing. I remember as a child growing up in the city of Detroit, being able to walk through the neighborhood and eat from my neighbor's yard, or sit in a plum tree and, chew on plums to my lips, got a little purple or poked out. The walnuts that are here, black walnuts are very expensive. So if you have a black walnut tree, you definitely want to keep it. A lot of people don't know. So, just encouraging folks, like you said, apple trees, take a little work, but what you reap from it, the return on investment is wonderful. So I'll just move into some of the ways working and navigating in the city of Detroit. What are some ways planning was here, the sustainability director was here. What are some of the ways that the city of Detroit and those different departments, you can pick any department from the city of Detroit, But what can the city do to assist folks like you in helping to get your information out, get your business moving to the next level? What are some of the things you think the city of Detroit, any department at all, can assist you with? We'll go with business.
Okay, so there's a few different departments that came to mind. I saw that you all were on the Department of Neighborhoods yesterday meeting. So that's one of the great benefits that the city has when integrating different businesses that actually already exist instead of what's the word, franchise, larger companies, because there's people who live in the neighborhood and want to see the neighborhood thrive no matter what district they're in. So continuing to offer spaces on the Department of Neighborhoods meetings, because that's one of the meetings that a lot of people in the neighborhood who live there can get exposure to the different businesses and farms. And then also the Detroit Land Bank Authority and whatever other entities they partner with and stuff, all the different entities that the Detroit Land Bank Authority and the city of Detroit, whatever pocket of land that they own, needs to be communicated, must be communicated more clearly, because there are entities that own a significant amount of land, and that's cool, but let's distribute it to those who want to take care, who want to legally take care. There's been people who've been taking care of the city of Detroit without compensation, without recognition for over 30 to 50 years. So there's people who legally would like to own the land, and the city of Detroit must release the land back to the neighborhoods so that it can be properly taken care of and generationally promoted to involve the holistic healing of the city of Detroit.
Thank you so much. Great, especially the land bank. For some of you, and I don't want to go too much into the land bank, but some folks have had great, what they call partnerships with the land bank. But for a lot of local urban farmers, I can't say that has been true. So, yeah, I'm just gonna put it out there. Land bank needs to do a better job at what they do. Pardon me? And the city too?
I said
EGC
too.
Yeah. Okay, so now he's okay. So I said I was gonna be good. A lot of folks know, they label me as a troublemaker. I talk too much. So I'm a slide. Thank you. I'm a slide on back over here. And if you want to hear my take on the land bank, I will talk to you after this. What's the name? But I do have to say what Desmond said about releasing it, and the fact that people need to know a little bit more about what they own. A lot of people in these neighborhoods know the land bank own it. They take care of the land bank's property, and then 10 to 15 years after they've been taking care of it, it's sold to somebody that doesn't look like them. So we know that. I don't know how to change that, but we might need to rally. But Gwen, can you go ahead and pick any department that you want to?
I think that in the same vein, there just needs to be more clarity around the ownership and the process and the steps to access and acquire that land. I think that, a lot of times the focus is on large developments and housing, which are important. I'm not saying they're not important, but having green space that is producing, it produces not only food to nourish our bodies, but emotional breaks from the asphalt and from the city. And we are fortunate to be in a city that does have a lot of green space, but making it more productive is good for the neighborhood. So I think that the other thing that I know that Keep Growing Detroit does a lot of work. This isn't specifically, it is related to what the city can do. Keep Growing Detroit does a lot of work in encouraging community gardens, school gardens, and home gardens, and they have great mapping. But creating a more cohesive plan of of how these different green spaces can combine. And I heard during the previous panel, they were talking about the Joe Louis Greenway and how people can get involved in, like, you know, getting small businesses in those areas. Well, I think that the farms that are here could be a part of all of that. And so, like, working together as neighbors who are growing is a good thing too.
To answer that, Natasha?
Sure. So the very first thing that comes to mind is land access, right? Which we've already covered. I think another thing that is, let me back up.
You have the mic.
Absolutely agree that the Detroit Land Bank can be very difficult. I will say though, I'm happy to say that Oakland Avenue Urban Farm, North End Christian CDC, which is the nonprofit entity, does actually have a really great relationship with them. We're community partners, and so I'd say over the last 10 years, we've been able to acquire about 7 acres of land. Our campus is a full 7 acres. We produce on about 3.5 acres of that land, and so that's been super helpful for land access. The City of Detroit Zoning Department, I think that it's really important to change the zoning so that it supports urban agriculture, right? For instance, we are actively in the process of working, doing plan development work with the City of Detroit to rezone our entire campus so that it meets agricultural code. I was thinking about infrastructure and utilities as well, right? The City of Detroit should provide, well, it's more about the water access. That's another thing that is, disconcerting for us. Again, we're growing on about 3.5 acres of land, and yet we're still paying sewer departments, paying for sewer, water runoff in the sewer when ultimately all of the water is going into the ground and into our plants. So just changing policy around.
You're actually catching water for the city. It's actually
Yes.
doing the city a service.
Absolutely, and so not having that acknowledged is a bit frustrating, so.
Yeah. Thank you. What about you?
You
Don't
know,
sugarcoat it. What department?
you know who doesn't pay their water bill? The Illages. Ever. You know what the city of Detroit just gave them? Anybody know how much money we just gave them? $616 million in tax abatements. What could we do for food and farming with $616 million in taxes? Anybody? Just throw it out there, seriously. Everything. I'd have this place looking like the English Gardens back, in our terribly white heritage land. Yeah, so couple that with the fact that on average, it was mostly Black residents in Detroit who were overassessed their taxes by that same $600 million, which led to 100,000 home foreclosures. So not only do we not have access to the land that is just sitting there, also not appreciating taxes by Detroiters who want to pay their taxes to have their city function better, they're actually taking houses away. So, I say scrap the whole thing and start over, top down. But to have a more productive, pragmatic answer to your question instead of sitting here rambling on my Marxist soapbox, for those that do know, sorry for being redundant, for those that don't know, in most major municipalities in America, probably not so much other developed nations, but in America particularly, it is de jure illegal to have edible food growing in your front yard or in city right-of-ways. So, whenever we see a median or sidewalk trees, it's technically illegal to have fruit growing on them for whatever stupid reason they come up with. It's racism. They label it as we don't want pests, or we don't want to have to clean up stuff. And I'm like, pay people to clean up the streets, a living wage, and give them a pension. Anyways, so I would say I think a lot of cities are coming around to the idea of edible landscaping, of like edible food commons. And again, that's what we're trying to show, right? We're in the middle of the neighborhood on what used to be a public school, which is sad and devastating in its own way, but at least we're putting it into good use. So what would it look like if instead of invasive Norway maples and useless calorie pears, we had apple trees or pawpaws, or instead of box woods everywhere, it was raspberry patches, and people could just walk the street and eat things. And again, we could make jobs. People for Parks and Rec, or I don't know, General Services Department could be tasked with pruning and fertilizing and harvesting any stuff that's becoming overripe, and then take it over to farm to freezer and flash freeze it, or just give it to people. Super, super unintended, low-lying fruit. How many people for how many years could you employ with $616 million? I don't know, a lot. I'm not a mathematician, I'm a farmer, so.
I think we could probably solve our hunger issue. And it's really not a hunger issue, you guys know that, right? Y'all know it's really not a hunger issue. It's what people choose to do. As far as our grocers, we've had markets to blow themselves up to get insurance money, the city knows, and now we have open space just there, blighted, just there. So I apologize for that, that was my little soapbox. But one of the things we have not, and I don't think, and I've been in and out, so I could be mistaken, but I didn't hear race being talked about today. And we know that we have some problems with racism in the city of Detroit, segregation, folks, resources going to other folks more so, like the Illages versus my man over here who is growing food. So what exactly, or what can we do in the food systems to help combat some of the racism that's going on? And a lot of times people use, and they say food deserts. But you guys know deserts, the cactuses grows in a desert. We're not a desert. We're not a desert. We can grow food. We have people that are growing food. So how is it that we still have these disproportionate places and opportunities for our folks to have healthy food? So can we just maybe speak a little bit about what your organization is actually doing to help offset some of that racism and that under stuff that's going on in the city of Detroit?
I'll start. I did mention earlier that the executive director is a part of the USD Urban Ag Innovative Production Committee. Again, that committee is specifically designed to create opportunities, financial opportunities via the USDA for Black and brown growers. So that's number one. Again, starting the Black Farm and Land Fund, creating that. We are also we're a food hub, right? We are aggregator of these Black and brown growers. We've worked with Eastern Market specifically to create a space for BIPOC growers to actually be able to do wholesale selling. But it is really to combat racism. I would say it is about creating opportunity and space for those growers that are undervalued and oftentimes set aside.
So I think that racism is systemic and subtle, and it is pervasive. And as a white woman, I bring a lot of privilege with me, especially in this work. Not to say that I'm not working hard, but I have access to language and my skin color. There's a lot of access that I get with being a white woman. And so what's important to me is to not only be a resource in creating space for other voices and a platform for other people, but also a place for white people to learn about the privilege that they have, because I think that there are many white people in this country and in Metro Detroit who don't acknowledge or recognize the privilege that they have themselves. So trying to make space and call that out. And also just trying to speak less, step back, and create space for others to be acknowledged and celebrated.
Thank you. Nancy.
I think people don't know the definition of racism. A lot of people just simplify it to color, or this person versus that person, or this creed, and it's systematic. It's the things that's been set up to work against different things, so that one or many different particular types of people cannot thrive. So there's different pieces to the puzzle that have been strategically planned for many years that I think some people just really don't understand in their immaturity. So what Deeply Rooted Produce does is to increase access to food, and access in a way that educates people, but also access in a way of tangibility. In this place is not a food desert, as Michelle mentioned. There's an abundance of food being produced, but who cares enough to make sure that food gets to where it's supposed to go is another question. There's grocery stores that waste thousands of pounds of food every single day that can otherwise be donated to a pantry or donated to people who get SNAP and EBT and things like that, or it can be donated to a chef like Dig or other people who can produce food and produce products out of otherwise wasted food. Food, or what is it called? Make food not waste. And different entities like that can benefit from grocery stores, corner stores, the work that the Food Policy Council is doing, all the different ways that we can cyclically and holistically integrate the things that already exist is what Deeply Rooted Produce strives to do. And I think that the basis of why it's not being done is racism and redlining and all the other isms that are keeping people where they're at. It's purposeful.
Thank you. One more. Strap your belt. Strap yourself in. Strap yourself in, guys.
I'll be nice. I'll play nice. On the topic of food rescue, Metro Food Rescue is here today. Chad does an amazing job, and his team. I had the privilege of working with them for a long time, and speaking of strapping your belt in, that's what the team does. I just drove a box truck around for 14 hours a day, and I'm like, what do you have? Where can I take it? So yeah, there's like you said, poverty or hunger. Anytime you ever hear people hunger, 1 in 8 kids, hunger. I'm just like, hunger is not a thing. Okay, it's not hunger. It's a resource management and systemic inability and unwillingness to actually make food go where it is. We produce an excessive abundance of food in this world. And the number always gets thrown around that 40% of produce in America is wasted. That's just on the consumer side. We're not discussing the produce that's deemed too ugly for the shelves in the grocery store. We're not discussing the food that is stopped at the border because industrial food comes from mostly the southern hemisphere, California, wherever it comes from. Crossing state lines or crossing international lines. They'll stop your produce and they'll get rid of stuff that they deem is not good. And then there's the vast amount of food that is left on the field to rot, or is just not picked. So we waste so much that could be taken and reused or composted or fed to people. It's not a far-fetched idea to think we never have to pay for food. It's a ridiculous concept to begin with. But racism. I made a mental note, not just because I think he speaks very well, but also in addition to, I like the answers that Dan Carmody gave about jobs, right? Tangible, material answers to the problems that we have, right? So I could sit here, and again, I'm a privileged person, right? Like I don't, as far as this position is concerned, like I could be the world's worst farmer as long as I make it look good. Like the university pays my checks. My livelihood isn't dependent on producing produce, feeding people. I mean, it is, but like if my tomatoes get blighted and I don't produce a single tomato this year, I'll still have a job. I can write it down as that. If that happened to Daz or Gwen, they'd be screwed. So I take that into consideration with the vast amount of privilege that comes with. So I can have more of these philosophical, conceptual, academic conversations. But you know, I can't talk to somebody about producing their own food if they don't have a house, if they don't have a job, if they don't have access to water, like we were talking about. So it's really hard to have a paradigm shift of like, where does our food come from? What's our relationship with food if you're not meeting your other basic necessities? Housing, water, job, emotional stability, your health, your mental health, your physical health. So, and when you have something as pervasive as racism, when you have an entire country and economic power structure that is based on white supremacy, it's like, you know, I could brew food all day for the rest of my life, and if we don't answer these basic problems, it doesn't really matter. So that's why we want to do things the way we want to do them. We want to teach, we want to try to give people tangible skills to employ themselves, or to create their own futures like they can here, especially Black and brown people in the city. But and it's a long ways away, but ideally we want to have another building on our site. It's like pole barn style, and there's going to be metalworking and woodworking studios in there. Yeah, like people can come do coding, whatever. And like extension is a vast program. Just to plug extension for a little bit, I'm one of like 600 extension employees. There's people that do youth programming, cooking, natural resources, everything, right? Like if there's something that can be taught to somebody, extension probably covers it. I'm one person. So we would invite these people in to teach, like, how can you be a metal fabricator? How can you be a machinist? How can you work with wood? Things that we taught to people for a really long time, and then like the late 20th century came around and people forgot about these things. Or like preserve this food. So take these fruits and nuts that will be grown and make jams, make butters, like tangible things that people can actually take and have tangible solutions to their lives. So it's not even a drop in the bucket, it's a drop in the ocean, but you know, we're doing our part.
Thank you. So I'm gonna go off a little bit and give all of you guys a challenge. Natasha mentioned what they're doing on their side, and that they're paying water. You said you're paying for sewage. Gwen mentioned they're capturing water to help, so they're keeping water out. But because they have a structure, is that correct? Because you have a structure, you have to pay into that system that was designed where everybody's supposed to pay into it. So we pay wholesale, they pay retail, something like that. But years ago, the People's Water Board did some reaching out because there were so many water bills that were so high, but these people were allowed to still operate. So do y'all research, because you never know. You could be looking at somebody, they got a $60,000 water bill, but we sitting in their place and we think everything is good, but we don't know, you know. And so just the resources, the way that the resources are labeled, and who has to pay and who doesn't have to pay, everybody look. The Eastern Market was on that list some years ago. I'm putting it out there. But yeah, they were on that list some years ago. So if they pay their water bill, I don't know, but are they connected? Because we might be sitting. Is that why we don't have water coming out the faucet? Because they ain't pay their bill? Is it cut off? Okay. Just wanted to let you know. Look, see, I told y'all I was a troublemaker. So they say that, but I mean, I just bring information. Now that was about 5 years ago, so they might have caught up on it, you know. You got to pay $2,500 to come in the Eastern Market to sell your produce. So hey, you know what we. So, but last but not least,
I mean, if we're gonna talk about who hasn't paid any water bills, don't forget Highland Park.
see, that's what I'm saying, y'all. We show up in places and we are happy to be in places, but we really don't know like how we got to those places, or what's going on in some of those places. Does the image pay? You go down there, they make a whole lot of money. They really didn't even need the tax. What was that tax incentive? Did they need that? They didn't even need it and they received it. So, y'all figure that out. But last but not least, volunteers, where you're located, if you have volunteer days, what can some of these people do to help you in your efforts? And if you have volunteer work days or opportunities, please let the people know so that they can come and lend their hands if they don't have dollars. Did y'all hear me? Lend your hands if you don't have dollars. So you don't have to come with dollars. You can come with your hands and your tools. So go ahead, we'll go from.
So how would we know, is it individually that we would have to look on the sites and see when you would need support for lending your hands?
I'm gonna let them answer.
Yeah, let's open it up.
I could just, real quick, here's what. Everybody here, I know you have a smartphone. Pull it out right now. I'm watching.
All right.
My mom's a teacher. I know how to watch a crowd. All right, so what you're gonna do, open up Instagram, if you have Instagram, or Facebook. First, you're gonna look up Coriander Farm and Kitchen, spelled like the herb coriander, CORIANDER.
_DET, that's our handle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You gonna like or follow that bad boy?
And send it to a few friends.
After you're done, you're gonna find
Deeply Rooted Produce. It's
One
just one
word?
word, yep, Deeply Rooted Produce. And if you really want to get involved in like a 2.5 acre project, follow Deeply Rooted Gardens, Inc., INC. That's our nonprofit arm.
Yes, and we are on Instagram and Facebook as well. That is Oakland Avenue Urban Farm. And actually, you can also go to oaklandavenueurbanfarm.org, which is our website, and right at the top. Because our volunteers are the most important part of our work. We're a very small organization, so hands are super important. We accept volunteers Monday through Friday. If you're visiting the website, you're getting the address, but we're in the historic North End, 9227 Goodwin Street in Detroit, Michigan. And we do accept volunteers Monday through Friday, or Saturday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Easy sign up, and we'll get back in touch with you.
Can you say yours again? I was still on the last.
Sorry, Oakland Avenue Urban Farm.
Thank you.
.org.
Okay.
And then last but not least, on Instagram, it's MSU_DET_AG, as in ag, MSU Detroit Ag.
Are you going to go to all of our phones and make sure that we did this?
Absolutely. Are you kidding me?
Who wants to hire Status as their marketing director?
Oh, absolutely. I'd quit so fast, just saying.
So, and I just have, I know you said no plugs, but I do have just maybe a 3-minute, 2-minute, 3-minute plug. Detroit Hive is here, and for those of for those of you who have allergies, or if your allergies have gotten bad because the land bank doesn't take care of their property and you have a whole lot of bees flying around, you can actually go over there and grab some honey. And if you have a teaspoon a day, that would actually help with the allergies in the area because it's local honey. So the local bees actually help with the pollination. And if you take that, you don't necessarily have to have allergies. You can go and get the tea and put it in you can get the honey and put it in your tea, but just a little plug because the allergies are they're skyrocketing this year.
So I've got a question on the farms and the grocers. for those of you that have also been in this a little longer maybe, but it's open to the whole panel, have you noticed that there's been an uptick in either purchasing of the product or visiting the farms recently? Like, for example, when you think of food and these food trends, now it's almost become like trendy in a way. Is that affecting any of the traction and the foot traffic that you're seeing with the usage of the farms, or has it been stagnant? I mean, stable and growing?
I would say local food has always been trendy,
Yeah.
per se, but it's been a privilege. Like, whoever could afford it, they already know that eggs were $6 to $7 a dozen, but they were getting the eggs that they knew the farmer, and they know where the chickens were raised at, things like that. So it's always been trendy. However, I've seen an uptick in business post-COVID, where people want to know where their food is coming from. They want to know, like, they want more access to it, and they also want to get involved. So as you'll see on our Instagram, we have volunteer days Wednesday, Friday, and Sundays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And people can get, like, once people start, harvesting their own food and getting involved with the actual day-to-day aspect of it, then they find more appreciation for it. So there's two ends of it. Some people just want to be able to take pictures on Instagram and say, hey, I'm supporting local, blah, blah, blah. But other people actually value it and get an intrinsic and a visceral connection to the food that they're eating, and you actually feel better. Like Michelle said, with the honey and stuff like that, you feel better once you eat it as well.
I will say that I feel like it has been trendy and it continues to be trendy, but that, one thing that we are trying to do that's different than what I feel like originally restaurants that were saying they were farm to table, and the term farm to table actually denotes a kind of like overly special meal where you're like a small plate meal, which is great. It's good to have a good place to go celebrate. But having a restaurant that's working to be more accessible and more approachable, not a menu that is not understandable to a common person, but featuring locally grown goods from our farm and other local farms, is something that we're particularly proud of. Allison and I, when we started, we would dream of going to these restaurants that served food that we grew. Like me particularly, I would be like, oh, I grew that. I want to taste what that tastes like with that chef's interpretation, but it wasn't accessible to me. And so while we aren't saying that we are cheap, because we're not cheap, food also costs money and preparation costs money, but we try to be accessible and approachable, and I think that it is a little bit different than we're trying to open people's perspective of what farm to table means. People come to the restaurant sometimes expecting, a fancier experience than they get, and we're kind of like a shoes optional situation. And so people come in and then maybe are a little surprised or not underwhelmed, but if they're expecting a fancy dinner and they're getting just like a casual canal side experience that's featuring local food, they're like a little surprised by it. So but farm to table doesn't mean fancy. Farm to table means that like people brew this with love and it's local.
They thought you were like them restaurants in New York, huh?
Yeah, we're not.
So I would say that before the pandemic, so first of all, Oakland Avenue Urban Farm is GAP certified, which is a USDA designation for good agricultural practices, which allows us to sell food to restaurants, hospitals, and the schools. Now, prior to the pandemic, I would say that there was a definite, the interest in locally grown food was exponential. Once the pandemic took place, I think 2021, our sales to restaurants and schools, that actually decreased a bit, but local foot traffic picked up. We did see that, and after the pandemic, we definitely saw that more people, as was mentioned, are definitely more interested in locally grown food. And so that's kind of been our trend.
And another question on my end, I'm raising my own hand because I'm so fascinated with this topic. Is it a generational thing? In Detroit, is there a trend or a tendency to be generational with visiting urban farms and realizing the importance of that level of quality of food, or having access to that level of quality of food? Or is it something that a new generation introduces their home or their family to? Urban farms in particular.
I think in specific cultures or specific people who grew up doing that, it's generational. So I work with a guy that's Italian, or like it's based off of how they grew up in their household and like if they value those things. Most of the people or most of the children in the city of Detroit don't know that fries come from potatoes. So if their parent is not exposing them to, local food, then they're not gonna know. I have a 3-year-old that's been on my back in the farm since he was born, so he has a different perspective on what food looks like. He eats cherry tomatoes from the actual plant, can eat them all day, harvesting raspberries himself. So it comes from birth in the different people that raise those people. Or some people are just far removed as well, because a lot of people, I'm speaking of point of view from a person of color, a lot of people of color have had that in their DNA, but they are far removed from it because of their environment that they're currently in. In my experience, I didn't even know until I became a farmer, my family had chickens and pears and all these different things, and I'm just growing up loving pears, but didn't know that when I grew up and would visit North Carolina, my mom would always like harvest fresh pears and stuff from my grandma's garden. So it's different things that we're removed from and may even need to take our feet off in the garden to reorient ourselves and remember who we are and who we were and who our people were, so that they can discover that generational, knowledge. But I don't think inherently it's generational unless, you're raised around it or your people were raised around it.
But I would also say too, it has to do with where you are, because you might want that, but right now, basic needs trump everything. So, like the city of Detroit, we've been trying to work on recycle for years, but we're still at the bottom. And so what we really have to think about is people and their basic needs where they are. If you're trying to figure out how to get food, you're not going to rinse out a can and put it in a recycle. You're not concerned about that going into the proper container. You're just going to put all of it in one spot because you're trying to figure out something else. It's too much to figure out. And so for some people of color on the east side, west side, north end, south end, they're trying to figure out how to survive daily. I mean, literally daily. They can't get to next week, can't get the next month. They can't get the 45 days when the spinach is gonna be ready. That, okay, I can grow in 45 days, I'll have spinach and we can eat, or that they can, grow lettuce, tomatoes, and something to make a salad where they can go out daily and this is what I can harvest to eat, because the lights might get cut off. I got to deal with DTE. DTE, is on my back. The water bill, we've had so many changes with the water bill and, the way that it works. Some of the sewage has been on our bills for years, but it's just coming where it's hitting people now. The $600,000 in taxes that was stolen. People are still recovering from that. That's life or death, where some folks that are not privileged enough to know that there are people in this world, in the city of Detroit, that are living every day, life or death, every day. Most of you guys in this room are privileged, and you probably don't think you are, but you are privileged. You were able to get here today, however you got here, you got here. You were able to not worry about what's going on in back and pay attention to the people on the panel. It's a number of people that's not here. One, they might have had to work. Most people work through the day. So how do they get information? I can't afford to take off to go and find out how to get funding or how to grow, how to be involved with you guys if I'm trying to get by daily. And like you said, some of our urban farms will know. They didn't say it. The lady from the land bank said it. Some projects or things that people are working on, it comes out of their own pocket. So if it comes out of my own pocket, then I have to go to work to get a check to even do this over here. So, you know, give folks grace. And, you know, if you think somebody is struggling, ask them what you can do to help. You know, a lot of times people are struggling, but people who are also struggling, you can do something little to help. Again, like I said, you don't always have to have money. You come with hands. A lot of times, some of these people would prefer you come with the hands than the money, because if you come with the hands, I don't have to use the money to hire somebody. So, just food for thought.
So, just wanted to piggyback off of the generational thing, like thinking about it as a generational opportunity, right? One example, we have Detroit Young Talent youth who come to work with us during the summer. And what I often find is that, you know, our young people, they're like, farming. I'm not a slave, right? Like, they're not really interested in that kind of work. And so I think, you know, it's important for our elders, for the adults, for people, for them to get the example, right? Like, the reason that my child, I have a 7-year-old, and she will go and pick broccoli from the garden and walk around with it like it's a lollipop, it's adorable, right? But she's been introduced to food and growing, and it's been made fun for her. I think it is about educating our youth, just ultimately helping them understand the importance of food and giving them opportunities to understand that there are career paths in urban agriculture, there are career paths in animal husbandry, right? That is the generational gap that I will see.
Well, I think I'll also add a plug onto MSU here, because when you talk about generational, you know, career gaps and learnings of how you get into careers, I mean, that's, I think, one of the brilliant things that you're doing with MSU's extension program, is that you're maybe able to also spread wider, potentially, given the resources that you have, opportunities for careers.
Yeah, so kind of to hybridize all of these questions, first and foremost, thank you to my 2 wonderful interns who are helping to make a 2-person team, a 4-person team for the summer. 3.5 acres is a lot of land. Yeah, so sometimes I'm on my game about like, there's a dedicated volunteer time. Other times I'm just like, just text me and show up. I'm there all day, every day. But if you are interested in volunteering, shoot us a DM on Instagram, stop me and grab my card. You know, our link tree is on our Instagram as well, with like certain dates and whatnot. So, but truly the best way to get a hold of me and to show up is to text me or like to get in a routine with us until we can sort of build out a better strategy. On the topic of trendiness, local food, for those that have been around for a long time, was super important and super popular and super profitable 2008 to 2011. That was the peak of farmer market income. That was the peak of farmers markets engagement, because all of a sudden nobody had expendable income. All of a sudden you couldn't go out to a grocery store, and now it's like, oh man, how do I get the most readily available produce at the best cost that's locally procured, yada, yada, yada. That's what we're talking about all day. Yeah, so 2008 to 2011 was a great time for food systems, as it is now, which is antithetical to what a lot of other people are dealing with, right? So there's like this inverse relationship where like when stuff gets bad, everybody's like, where's my food? And we're like, aha, this is why we do what we do. But it's bad because everybody else is in a poor situation. So, you know, we're calm, cool, collected about what we do, but everybody else is panicking. I mean, like, somebody called me from, I don't know, some local news channel wanted to talk about the egg prices. I'm like, what Dad said, yeah, it's like, eggs have always been at least $5 a dozen to me. Like, the people who get them for $2 a dozen, I'm like, I don't think you understand how this works. Nothing in this world costs that much. But, you know, so there is this inverse relationship where when everything else goes poorly, people revert back to where's my food coming from? So, and there is a generational tie into that, right? Where the way that we operate post-Green Revolution in like the 1950s is completely antithetical to how we've lived our lives for hundreds of thousands of years, well, 12,000 years if we're going to talk about agriculture. But it's like, you know, you grow your food and you eat it. We live in cities because we figured we can live where we put our food in the ground, and that's been our understanding of the human course of evolution in society. So in the last 70 years, we've been like, you don't have to do that. You can put on a suit and tie and go like lickety-clack in an office and figure it out from there, which, you know, it doesn't compute, right? So when that no longer offers you the ability for food, you're going to revert back to, well, I'll do it myself. Now, the problem becomes when you've become so systematically separated from that understanding, as Daz was talking about. Kids don't realize that produce comes from the ground. They think it comes from a styrofoam package on a shelf. So once you remove the ability and the education, that's a hard path to build back. And that's why I think my answer to the question is, if you can get to kids, and it sounds a little exploitative, but if you can get to kids, they'll get to their parents. Because ideally, and not that all parents are meant to be parents or they're good parents, but if you have parents that are being responsive to their children, and your child goes home and you're like, I want to grow tomatoes, or I want to eat more tomatoes, or I want to like eat fresh greens, those parents are going to respond to that pressure, right? And they're going to say, let's put it in a garden, let's whatever, right? My parents are immigrants. You know, I spent a lot of time in Greece growing up with my uncle and my grandfather who are farmers. And so like I grew up in the fields, and like I have vivid memories of my grandfather having this like badass like sickle knife, and he'd clean sugar beets for me. It wasn't quite a machete, it would like fold, it was sweet. Man, I hope he has it somewhere. I'll get it from him. But,
Not to cut you off just because of time, because we want to have a little bit of a break,
yeah.
but I will cut you off. I think one big takeaway from this panel in particular, and the day, and the next panel that we're getting into, which are our chefs and restaurant owners, that we definitely want you to be here for and stick around for, is this amalgamation of conversation and communication between both. How can they be gaining more access to or knowledge of the products that you have and why you're doing what you're doing, because they are also a client base for you. And also, how can the market be looking for it as well, right? How can those that are eating from certain restaurants be looking for also organic or fresh grown foods? So only because of time, because we should have a little bit of a break before we get into the next panel. I'll ask one question while I have everybody's sort of eyes on us. Given today's day, and I'm really kind of curious what you think. Do you think that what happened today on the topic of food and the mixing of the different interests and experiences and expertise maybe, or boots on the ground to city, was this beneficial for you? I'm kind of actually curious to see, was this something you think was beneficial? We're not looking for, you can down it too. Did you find benefit from being at a day like today? I'm curious to kind of know if it's a yes. Okay. Because what we would also like to do, and I say this to all of us, and I think the takeaway is, and we've got more of the day to go, but the takeaway is, what can we do with this now? Now that we're hearing all these great conversations, and you had the chance to also meet folks within the city that you might not have, or different organizations, what now can we do with this, right? Because everybody has a great platform and a great voice. Now what?
Now what?
Right? So I know that on our end as a media platform, our goal is to now continue telling that story and to keep aligning these missions, because again, we're being educated, I'm being educated about everything that everybody's saying here. And that's what I know that we'll take away from it and we'll be able to increase visibility on. But Yeah, I think we have a break, but I think we continue this conversation because Michelle, you're brilliant. You are all brilliant, all four of you. And we all need to go help the urban farms that we're looking at right in front of us. I'm first. I'll be volunteering. You got it. Thank you for speaking.
Thank you, guys.